Now, we finally get to the last point. The creation narrative of chapters 1 and 2 in Genesis, of course, are followed by the story of the fall in Genesis 3. The consequences of that greatly undermine, they greatly inhibit the ability of mankind to fulfill his mandate, his creation mandate. For example, one curse is to impose pain upon Adam's particular area of responsibility, the raising of crops from the ground. In verses 17 through 19 of chapter 3, it says, "Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you." So even though Adam is kicked out of the garden, in order to survive, he has to still till the land. But his productivity will be greatly hindered by this curse. Similarly, another curse imposes pain on Eve's particular area of responsibility, the bearing of children. Verse 16, "I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children." So for Adam, the fruit of the land will come only through pain, and for Eve, the fruit of her womb will only come through pain. But the next curse introduces pain and conflict into the one flesh union itself. Prior to their transgression, Adam and Eve, we could suppose, lived in the garden in perfect harmony. Adam ruling as the head of his family and Eve as his helper. But after the fall, conflict is introduced into their relationship as a punishment for their sin. Eve is given the disposition to oppose Adam, to resist his headship. "Your desire will be against your husband," God says. And Adam responds by lording his authority over his bride, with a rule that would be enforced by his greater strength and aggressiveness. A conflict which again will greatly hinder their ability to exercise dominion over the creation, for they had become a house divided against itself. So alienation between God and man leads then to alienation between man and woman, alienation between man and creation, and alienation between woman and her offspring. But even more fundamental than this is the division created within man himself, a schism between his body and soul, flesh and spirit. The moment they eat of the forbidden fruit, notice that Adam and Eve become aware of their nakedness. A rapid onset of shame directed at their bodies, leading them to hide their body not only to each other, but to hide it from their Creator, symbolizing a war which had begun within themselves. A battle between spirit and flesh, between heaven and earth, you might say, where the body no longer feels like an integral part of the self, but it feels foreign to it, something that is a threat to it, and perhaps even revealing something about the self that the fallen spirit doesn't want to be revealed, and thus covering it. And it seems to me that transgenderism represents an extreme version of this conflict, where the body becomes wholly alien to the soul, creating a dysphoric feeling that the person is in the wrong body, and thus their body becomes an enemy. It becomes so shameful that covering it is no longer sufficient. Maybe we could say it must come to a point where it's no longer permitted to speak. A conflict which ends in violence being perpetrated against the body, where the body becomes a scapegoat, as Favali puts it, blamed as the sole source of one's pain and sacrificed on the altar of self-will. Now, the cause of the Spirit's rebellion against the body can be psychological. It can be spiritual. It can even, we've learned, be social. All of which, however, find their origins in the fall. And rather than working out those issues in an effort to reconcile body and spirit, which, by the way, is the ministry of the Holy Spirit, the ministry of reconciliation, reconciling not just man to God and man to man, but soul to body, flesh to spirit. Instead of choosing to reconcile body and spirit, they choose instead to cause physical harm to a perfectly healthy body, defiling God's good creation, this gift that He has given to them, making, in fact, the chance of reconciliation all the more difficult, if you think about it. Perhaps even impossible moving forward if you make these kinds of changes. They may, in doing so, make their alienated condition permanent, where their body now really is alien to them. It's an alien body because it has been mutilated. And therefore it really is shameful, monstrous, no longer really human. The surgery accomplishing the opposite of what it promised. Instead of reconciling the body to the spirit, by destroying the body, it creates perhaps a permanent division, at least until the resurrection, when we receive a new glorified body. All of this to say is that we cannot participate in such things, especially with our words.